members of the media, let me be advised by you when you're ready. Are you ready? Everybody's ready? Okay. Well, good morning, and may I apologize for the late start, but we are going to be joined shortly by another member of the team who's caught up in some traffic, a lot of rain, I understand, in central Trinidad, and she's on her way. This morning, we have called this press conference to address three essential issues that currently are affecting the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. One, the Venezuelan refugees economic migrant crisis, manifested, as you are all aware, in the recent drowning of over 20 Venezuelan nationals, and the haphazard policy approach taken by this administration in this particular context. That's the first matter that will be dealt with by the MP for Naparima and the MP shadowing Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. Then, if our sister arrives by the time Rodney Charles is completed, or would have completed his presentation, she will address the issue of the imminent and impending increases in the price of pasta and macaroni products in Trinidad and Tobago from the 1st of January, and the impact of such increases on the ordinary people who, as you know, macaroni is a staple for many ordinary average households in our country. And the final area will be addressed by my good self, and that has to do with the betrayal of the PNM government led by Dr. Keith Rowley to fulfill a manifesto pledge, several budget pledges and promises, both by the Prime Minister and the Attorney General and the Minister of Finance, to implement and to operationalize Act Number 1 of 2015, known as the Public Procurement and Public Disposal of Property Act. Their failure to operationalize that important piece of legislation and its implication for banditry, thievery, and open and naked corruption in Trinidad and Tobago. I will address that final issue. So without much further ado, I will turn you over to the Honorable Rodney Charles, MP for Naparima rather, and Shadow Minister with responsibility for Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my brother, senior brother, Senator Wade Mark. As the chairman of this morning's proceedings indicated, I'll be speaking on the matter of our Venezuelan foreign policy. And at the same time, I welcome you to this morning's news conference. Government's handling of the Venezuelan situation requires a comprehensive review, overhaul, and rethink. It is not working. It is serving neither the interests of Venezuelans here, nor those risking their lives on the seas, nor the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, whose welcoming mat may soon experience stresses, nor our international reputation, nor relations with future Venezuelan administrations, nor our economic relations with our major trading partners, nor our domestic social peace and harmony. It has failed. It continues to fail. It seems headed for total and absolute failure. This failed policy may even put us at odds with our CARICOM sister Guyana, which, as we speak, has an unresolved territorial dispute with the Maduro regime at the International Court of Justice, known as the ICJ. So while major trading countries are beating a path to Georgetown, Dr. Rowley is hell-bent on embracing fulsomely Guyana's adversary. Dr. Rowley does not have the sophisticated diplomatic skills to nuance complex diplomatic crises. He sees things in binary terms: black versus white, imps versus patriots, friends versus foe. And Dr. Rowley is not the diplomat we need in these difficult times. Dr. Amory Brown, for his part, appears to be an absentee foreign minister. Now, managing our relations with our more populous neighbor has always been challenging. Recall the many skirmishes between our fishermen and the Guardia Nacional. Recall the many times we tried and failed to consummate cross-border energy arrangements. Now, if we do not manage this crisis effectively, then future Venezuelan administrations will take note of how we treated them in their hour of need. They will remember the deaths at sea, whether or not the fault was ours or theirs. They will not forget the human trafficking and prostitution of their women. They will think long and hard about whether we could have, notwithstanding our limited resources, done better to promote democracy in their homeland. And if future generations of Venezuelans conclude, rightly or wrongly, that our country acted not in their best interests and that scores remain to be settled, then we better hope and pray that future Trinidad and Tobago administrations will be up to the task diplomatically and otherwise of preserving our sovereignty in what will certainly be difficult circumstances. We may even have to increase our spending on national security to unsustainable levels. That is the problem we face. And that is why today the UNC is calling on the Keith Rowley administration to do 4 things in our national interests. 1, develop and seek regional and global support for a well-thought-out, revised migrant refugee policy that is humane, consensually developed, recognizes our international treaty obligations, our absorptive capacity, our national security concerns, and our human resource needs. In the absence of such a policy, our actions appear incoherent, reactive, uncoordinated, ad hoc, and lacking guiding principles that are defensible, diligently pursued, and which serve our interests. The second request of the UNC: immediately reframe our stated guiding foreign policy principle, honored in the breach of non-interference in the internal affairs of our neighbor. Every action this Rowley administration has taken has supported one side of the Venezuelan divide. Whether it be Dr. Rowley's fulsome embrace of Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, whose government stands accused by the United Nations of committing crimes against humanity against its citizens, or alleged sale of fuel despite ongoing sanctions, or Rowley's reported vow not to vote at the OAS until Guaido rep goes. These actions do not bespeak a posture of studied neutrality. The third request of the UNC: instead, adopt a policy of Trinidad and Tobago being an honest broker, bringing contending forces in Venezuela to the table of reason with the sole purpose of convening early, internationally supervised elections so that the will of the Venezuelan peoples will be determined and will prevail through free and fair elections. We should champion this position unambiguously at CARICOM, in the Commonwealth, at the OAS, and at the United Nations with the group of Latin American and Caribbean countries. It is called GRULAC, the group of Latin American and Caribbean countries, of which we are a respected member of that body at the United Nations. And the fourth requirement is for our National Security Minister to get off his behind and seriously lock down our borders. Because of the egregious incompetence of Minister Stuart Young and his well-known inability to lock down our borders, every Tom, Dick, Harry, Perez, Consuelo, and human trafficker knows that there is a more than even chance that they will not be caught entering our waters, and therefore they take the risk, and some of them die. This leads to waves of illegal, undocumented immigrants, the overburdening of our social safety nets, unpopular deportations, and worse, from an international image standpoint, dead bodies in surrounding waters. It is time for Minister Stuart Young to stop pussyfooting and recognize that his incompetence is the root cause of our Venezuelan crisis. Unless he stops talking and gets his act together and stems the tide, Trinidad and Tobago may well sometime in the not too distant future face an existentialist threat, not unlike that of Cyprus, when after 1974, a de facto Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus was created out of what was previously the sovereign unitary Republic of Cyprus. Already, there is talk in Venezuelan circles that Trinidad and Tobago is part geologically and historically of Venezuela. We are part geologically and otherwise of the Venezuelan territory. We ignore such comments at our peril. So, Dr. Rowley, this is not time for badgeon utterances, gallerying, and bullying. Get your act together. Get your national security and foreign and CARICOM affairs ministers to perform or fire them forthwith. Dr. Rowley, think about your future. Think about the future of our country, your legacy, and what all of this means for future generations of Trinidad and Tobago. We live next to a powerful neighbor, and we have, in diplomacy, they say when your neighbor sneezes, you catch a cold. Neighboring countries catch a cold. Our country demands no less. This will determine the long-term survival of Trinidad and Tobago as a sovereign nation, taking control of its activities within its borders. I thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, my colleague, MP for Naparima, Rodney Charles. We have with us now Sister Vandana Mohit. She is our shadow minister with responsibility for social development and family services, member of parliament for Chaguanas East. And as I indicated to you earlier, we have received information that the government of Trinidad and Tobago has increased or is about to increase import duties on pasta and what is called macaroni deriving therefrom. and we are concerned about the possible impact of those duties on rising prices for a basic staple for the citizens of TNT. So our sister will now address that issue, and I welcome Sister Vandana Mohit.
Thank you so much, colleague and experienced Weidmark Senator, as well as my colleague in the House, MP Rodney Charles. Welcome, pleasant good day to all of you from the media. This morning we are here to deal with critical issues which will impact on our nation's citizens. And as colleague mentioned, the possible increase in the prices of pasta and macaroni. Here we have with us this morning a legal document which proposes a 40% increase in the prices of pasta and macaroni. A very misleading, very much so misleading document, since this document deals with the increase in tariffs and duties in macaroni and pasta and other items. Friends all, what we must notice is that this document states 40%, a 40% increase. And if these duties are allowed to be increased, we can see that the price of pasta/macaroni, it will be increasing by an amount between 20 to 30% on the supermarket shelves. And why I said earlier that this document is misleading, it's because it states 40%, but I have an article here arising out of a recommendation from Trade Minister Paula Gopi-Schoon, who represented Trinidad and Tobago at a CARICOM meeting where she raised two issues pertaining to macaroni, pasta, as well as cement. And at that particular time in 2020, the new tariff on pasta turned to 40%, up from 20%. And this legal document states 40%. And it is therefore misleading, because by stating it's rising from 20 to now 60%, because in 2020 it would have risen from 20 to 40%. All right? So we have to really ask ourselves the question, whilst the minister would have stated at this particular CARICOM meeting that this situation or rise or recommendation which she would have made would be to, would seek, it were of interest, those who have interest, to protect local manufacturers. We have to ask ourselves, are they protecting? Because here we can see that all of us sitting in this room, you know what macaroni, pasta do within the average household. The average household, in light of COVID-19, has been affected. The impact of COVID on our citizens and local businesses, it has been negative. And in an average household, you have what macaroni and pasta do for that average household is it helps to feed an entire family. The traditional Sunday meal within a family is you can have a proper meal with rice, macaroni pie, callaloo, and some chicken. So I'm just saying that the rise in macaroni pasta would definitely negatively affect the average household in light of what this country is facing. And what we must notice, though, is that whilst this government is attempting to be strategic in protecting local manufacturers, we have to ask ourselves, which local manufacturers are they protecting? And in the midst of trying to protect and claim to be trying to protect local manufacturers, they are hurting the average household. So this morning, as we raise this issue, whilst we have local manufacturers within the pasta and macaroni market, we have to ask, who are they the friends of? And in addition to that, we would notice that the price of macaroni and pasta, would have been able to stay at a particular cost in the market and supermarket shelves due to the fact of the imported macaroni pasta, which would have created a competitive market. And when these import duties are placed, is it that we are trying to turn away those imported products so that the local manufacturer of macaroni pasta will be protected so that he can have an increased price in macaroni/pasta? Another item which I choose to deal with is, we have to also ask ourselves here this morning, most of the imported macaroni and pasta comes from Turkey and South Africa. Turkey, South Africa, and Trinidad have all signed onto the WTO. And so we ask, is Trinidad now breaking the WTO rules by imposing abnormal protection duties on these products, which is serious? All right, so that is a very short contribution, but we all know what macaroni and pasta do for our citizens in terms of feeding the household. And to close, I would just say that whilst we attempt to claim we are protecting our economy, we are protecting the nation, really and truly this government needs to get serious in terms of their protection of citizens at this time. Citizens are facing a lot of hardships. There are families this Christmas season who can't even afford a meal. And these types of products actually assist a family in what we call stretching to feed a family. And this government, in their budget presentation, would have claimed or indicated that they were going to increase duties on apples, grapes, and other luxury food products. Where are those increases? But you choose to attack macaroni. Get serious, protect our citizens, and stop playing games. Thank you very much. Back to our colleagues.
Thank you very much, our Sister Mohib Vandana. I will now address another important issue affecting our society and our economy. Because as you know, corruption can have a very deleterious impact on the quality of life and the standard of living of the citizenry of our country. It can also contribute to a lowering of the quality of our democracy. So this issue of procurement is vital, is crucial, and obviously very, very significant for our citizenry well-being. On the 4th of December 2020, 16 days ago, Act number 17 of 2020, which amended the Parent Act called the Public Procurement and Public Disposal of Property. Or I should put it another way, the Disposal of Public Property Act, that is Act number 1 of 2015, was amended not once, not twice, but 3 times by this Rowley-led administration. And the final amendment, which was debated about 2 weeks ago in the both houses of Parliament, placed the nail in the coffin of procurement as it relates to transparency, accountability, integrity, and value for money. Now, the Rowley-led PNM government falsely championed in opposition and represented in their 2015 manifesto the need to address corruption and bid rigging in the procurement of goods, works, and services. But those were words, cheap talk, old talk, because with the 3 amendments to the Parent Act, that is Act number 1 of 2015, the last Act, number 17 of 2020, dismantled and destroyed both the letter and spirit of Act number 1 of 2015 and literally established 2 parallel procurement regimes in Trinidad and Tobago. One under the Procurement Regulation Board and the other under the Minister of Finance, who is one of the most powerful ministers in the Rowley-led cabinet. In the amendment to the parent legislation, which was recently debated and passed, the Rowley-led government literally gutted and destroyed the efficacy of Act number 1 of 2015. And in the process, legalized thievery, banditry, and naked and wholesale corruption. Members of the media, this represented not only a breach of trust, but a complete betrayal of the PNM's commitments and promises to the people through its 2015 manifesto and several other promises in various budgetary statements by the Minister of Finance, as well as commitments given by the Prime Minister and his Attorney General to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. When we examine the gutted 2015 public procurement legislation, and we look particularly, members of the media, the elimination of any oversight by any independent body as it concerns the sale and disposal of public assets and public property or properties. It will tell you where we are. Can you imagine the disposal of our assets at the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Company Limited. Take, for example, Paria Fuel Trading Company. Take, for example, the Guayakara refinery assets, which is now on the chopping block, as we know, through a bid by Patriotic Energies and Technologies Company Limited. What the government did in these amendments in Act 17 of 2020 was remove completely from public view, from oversight by an independent body of any transactions involving the sale and disposal of our assets, be they, as I said, at Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited or any other asset that they wish to dispose of. Now, members of the media, you are aware that the Prime Minister and his Minister of National Security visited Australia, and they, as if they represent some independent body that can analyze value for money, accountability, and transparency in a dispassionate way, decided through a committee set up by themselves, headed by themselves, took a decision by themselves without any independent oversight. They decided to purchase 2 fast ferries from Incat and Ostal at over $1 billion TT dollars. Let me tell you something. $1 billion TT dollars, and there is no transparency, there is no accountability, there is no oversight into this transaction. The procurement process was conducted by the executive arm of the state, by the cabinet, himself overseeing himself. Stuart Young heads an interministerial committee that oversaw this whole process, which was endorsed by the cabinet, spending over $1 billion TT dollars on the purchase of those 2 ferries that are supposed to come here to deal with the sea bridge situation. This is one aspect of what you call corruption because of the lack of transparency and accountability. How can Dr. Rowley and his cabinet decide for the people of Trinidad and Tobago what is good for them and what is not good for them? How can they be responsible for the procuring of these vessels without any independent oversight as it relates to value for money, as it relates to transparency, as it relates to integrity? Members of the media, these same 2 gentlemen, they are in love with boats. They are in love with boats. So they were not satisfied with spending $1 billion to buy 2 fast ferries for Tobago and for the sea bridge. They went further and they bought what? 2 Cape-class patrol vessels. From who? Ostal. From Ostal. We have done the research. The Australian Navy bought the same 2 vessels with similar specifications, similar designs. Maybe I have to change here, I have to change there. In 2011, you know for how much in equivalence to our TT dollars? 300 million TT dollars. They bought that through the National Bank of Australia in 2011. We are being told in Trinidad and Tobago, those same 2 vessels that cost the Australian Navy 300 TT dollars is now costing us $600 million. $300 million more. We call on the Minister of National Security, and we call on Dr. Keith Rowley, who heads the cabinet, to account for that extra $300 million. What is that $300 million for? It is 2 vessels, the same vessels that were purchased by the Australian Navy. Where has this $300 million more gone to? This is why they don't want procurement. That is why when they introduced the amendment to the Parent Act in Act 17 of 2020, they removed government-to-government agreement and government-to-government contract, technical corporations, private-public partnership agreements, loans with multinational lending agencies, be the World Bank, the IMF, the IADB. We must have no scrutiny over these matters. You see, we are dumb. The people are dumb in this country. That is what Rowley would like us to believe. And they are the brightest and the best. And they alone must decide on these matters. Hence the reason they gutted the government-to-government arrangement. So the procurement regulator will no longer oversee these transactions. You know who will oversee them? The second procurement regime. That is the cabinet. So the cabinet is going to oversee these things. That is why we believe a criminal forensic investigation is needed into the purchase of not only the 2 fast ferries, but more importantly and significantly, these 2 fast patrol Cape class vessels. We want to know as a party where the extra $300 million have gone. Where? Dr. Rowley and his Minister of National Security and the cabinet must account for this excessive price of those 2 Cape class patrol vessels. We are doing our own investigations on that, into that matter. And you know what is even worse? They went to an institution in Australia called EFIC, the Export Finance Insurance Organization, or company and a corporation, and they borrowed money. They borrowed money, but there is a lot of confusion with what they have paid out and what they have actually borrowed. But we are studying those documents. We need further documents from the government, and we will have more to say on this matter very shortly, members of the media. We want to make it clear that this decision by the government, let me also bring to your attention, in Act number 17 of 2020, which is an act to amend the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act number 1 of 2015. In clause 5, the Minister of Finance, not the procurement regulator, will be overseeing the following. All legal services. The Minister of Finance will determine that with his cabinet colleagues. Only when they determine it, they will then pass it on to the procurement. So in other words, they slam the door and then they say, okay, you can now open the door after it has been slammed. So they will now pass on the information through some artificial amendments to the legislation to the procurement officer or regulator. He in turn will then pass it on to the Speaker and the Speaker, at her earliest convenience, will table it in Parliament, then we in Parliament can now file a motion to debate it. But the legal services have already been given out. So what effect this will have? This is making a mockery of the procurement process. The Minister of Finance is not satisfied with legal services. He goes with debt financing services for the national budget. So he can borrow from any institution, whether locally, regionally, and internationally. And there is no oversight of that process. He will borrow and then inform us he has borrowed $1 billion. Could you imagine when the Kamala Prasad administration left office in 2015, the debt to GDP ratio stood at 47.5%. You know what it is today? Over 80.5% under Rowley and Imbert, rushing towards 100% because they have no money and they keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, mortgaging the future of our country and our children. That is what they are doing. In addition, all accounting and auditing services will be done by the Minister of Finance and the government. That is the second procurement agents in the whole scheme of things. Medical, emergency, or other scheduled services will be done by the Minister of Finance. And there's a third one, such other services as the minister may by order determine. But you know what? They try to appear to be accommodating. They put negative and they now change it to affirmative. So they will do what they have to do, come and debate it in the Parliament. The ayes have it. Simple majority. It is the same simple majority that they use under the cover of COVID to deny us the right to speak for a full time for 40 minutes. They have now chopped down, slaughtered the speaking time of all members of Parliament, including members of the opposition, from 40 and 45 minutes, respectively, to 20 minutes. That is what the tyranny of the majority means. And that is what he is going to do with the affirmative resolution. He brings it, we debate it, and then the ayes have it. It passes. It becomes law. That is what this thing is about. Well, we want to say the following to Dr. Rowley and his gang. There are four, I call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The gang of four. I don't have to call their names. You know the gang of four. They are the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Hear what we are demanding of these four horsemen of the apocalypse. We want them to immediately withdraw these disturbing amendments to the public procurement and disposal of public property, and return the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act number 1 of 2015 to its original pristine glory. We want it returned to its status quo. And we want to tell them, until they do so, the United National Congress will not be supporting any legislation they bring to that parliament. We will not support any legislation they bring to parliament until they return the Public Procurement of 2015, Act number 1 of 2015, to its original status. I want to tell you, we will not cooperate with this gang of four, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. They are the cabinet. They constitute the government. The rest of them are just for show. They are the real decision makers in the cabinet. We will not cooperate with them until they bring back the original Public Procurement Act. We will isolate them. We will expose them at every turn. We will not cooperate with the PNM and the four horsemen of the apocalypse until they return public procurement legislation as it was done initially by Act 1 of 2015. And until they decide to do so, they will get no support from this United National Congress. So these are the initial thoughts we have to share with you on this public procurement. Because I want to tell you in closing, this Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act of 2015 received the support of the UNDP. It received the support of the Inter-American Development Bank. So this act that was passed that the PNM did not vote for in the House of Representatives, their senators voted for it in the other place, in the Senate, but the elected MPs in the House of Representatives voted against the measure. That act was supported by the UNDP and the IADB. Where are the regulations? Where? When are they coming? Well, it will make no sense bringing them again, you know, because you have gutted the legislation. You have destroyed the legislation. You have made a mockery of Act number 1 of 2015. By your actions, you have legalized thieving, banditry in this country. So you can do what you want. And like the founding father of the nation would say, when I speak, no dog must bark. So Rowley has become an autocrat, a dictator. He does what he wants, when he wants. But we want to tell him he has met his match. We will push him back, push him out, until the people demand new elections in this country, and we will see the back of this autocrat and tin-gourd dictator called Dr. Keith. Members of the media, I pause, and we will entertain any questions at this time. Any questions, members of the media?
Right.
How do you feel about the public's reaction to this issue and the public talking about Trinidad and Tobago sovereignty and people speaking to the issue of the involvement of international bodies in certain matters it relates to Trinidad and Tobago and the Venezuelan issue?
Well, the United National Congress stands on the firm position that whatever decisions are made should be made in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, first and foremost. And if you look at our policies, it is tied to what we feel are the inherent interests of our country. For example, the first one was a refugee policy. And when you get it out, you would see the refugee policy should look at our absorptive capacity. How many people can we take in this country? Can we take 16,000, 20,000, 30, 40? So clearly, they have not done the math. Secondly, how is our interest improved if we have children of these migrants who are born in Trinidad, who are citizens, who are not getting education? We are creating a ghetto. And that cannot redound to the benefit of our country. And my fear is that if we do not look at the numbers of Venezuelans And as far as I'm concerned, it could be anywhere from 100,000 to 20,000. If you look in South, 1 in every 15 or 1 in every 10 persons, yesterday I checked, on High Street, San Fernando, is Venezuelan. If you take 1 in 10, that's 130,000. We don't want to go there. What will happen if they become assertive and demand of our government that we recognize their right to exist, which they're entitled to as citizens, and they want to work with Venezuela? What happens if we have coming into our country criminals? Criminals. We don't know. That is immoral. What Stuart Young, what the Prime Minister is doing to Trinidad and Tobago. We will wake up one day and realize we don't have a country. So you punish our citizens. Our farm workers in Canada, the Canadian government had to treat with them because our government feel they're God to determine who could come and who cannot come. As my colleague said, when I say come, you cometh, and when I say go, you goeth. So the Canadian government had to deal with. Meanwhile, Venezuelans are slipping in, untested. So all of us exposed because we don't know who is in coming into our country. We have lost Trinidad and Tobago. Wake up one day and we'll realize we have 3 parties. An Afro-based party, an Indo-based party, and a Latin party. And it is for us to have the intellectual understanding. We call the government and say, look, let us reason together. We have something to put on the table. You have ideas. Let us work with the UN. Let us work with the human rights organizations. Let us work with the business community who probably will argue that they need a certain type of labor. Let us work with the agriculturalists in our country who need farm workers. Nothing at all. They just sit down and decide. And I'm saying to them that Dr. Rowley and his cabal, they are destroying my country of Trinidad and Tobago. And they have no moral authority to continue in office.
Do you agree with the statements that the government should reach out to international bodies for aid to assist with the Venezuelan issue?
Of course. And the fact that we do not have a policy in place, we have a refugee policy, but it's outdated. It needs update. The fact that we do not have a refugee policy or a migrant policy, in fact, they're not sure whether we have migrants here or refugees. Refugees are persons who are fleeing persecution. But he doesn't want to admit that his friend is persecuting even though the United Nations tells us that they are committing genocide and crimes against humanity, not genocide, crimes against humanity on their own citizens. The UN said so. But he does not want to admit that. So he says they are migrant workers. Well, there are UN conventions that govern their conventions on the treatment of migrants. So I do not know. We are told that we are doing it and our resources are being stretched. And then we are told by the United States government that, no, we give is it $1 million US or so to the Trinidad government? Are we accessing EU funding? Are we accessing United Nations funding, World Bank funding, IDB funding? What is our policy? And the reason why they are not doing that, I suspect, is because when these people do not operate by VAPs, like Dr. Rowley has our policy in his head. So he comes to a meeting and he extends it by 6 months. And when that finishes, he comes to our next meeting, a further 6 months. They want long-term strategic plan. What is your plan for these people who are in your country?
And as you mentioned, the extension, what is the UNC's take on that extension? And you've mentioned the sociological impact of the Venezuelan issue on Trinidad and Tobago. How do you see that playing itself out?
Our policy is, rather than having incremental ad hoc extensions, we should have a long-term plan. What is our, in the first place, a UNC government would not have unknown numbers of undocumented foreigners in our country. We would lock down the borders. We would decide how many we can take because we want to be humane. So we decide, we talk to the ministry, we talk to all the stakeholders, and we figure we could take 20,000. We let that be known. That is our figure. And when we reach that 20,000, the borders are locked. You don't come in our boat. Because once you come in our borders, we have to deport you. And that is not good from an optics standpoint, particularly little children. But once our borders are locked down, people will not leave Venezuela. They won't risk it because they know they're going to be stopped. So that a UNC government would have handled this thing scientifically. It would be data-driven, it would be fact-based, and it would be tied into our absorptive capacity. Because sooner or later, Trinidadians, it's starting to happen, are going to get the welcoming mat will be pulled away because they're seeing competition for jobs. They are seeing families being destroyed. But ladies have to live, and husbands, and I am an old man, and they have to eat our food because these are human beings doing human things to survive. We have a government that has to recognize that and deal with those things frontally. Dr. Rowley is not living up to the requirements of a 21st century first world leader of Trinidad and Tobago at this time.
And the last question on that issue, in terms of, we heard as well, calls for CARICOM members to assist. What is your take on that as well? What do you think?
Of course, if Trinidad were a leader, as in the time of Eric Williams, between Manley, Eric Williams, Grantley Adams, they ran CARICOM. So in fact, Mia Motley is 10 times ahead in the global village in terms of respect. Nobody comes to talk to Dr. Rowley. CNN comes, BBC comes. He would chase them away, call them imps. He's not a diplomat. You know what Sir Winston Churchill said about diplomacy? Diplomacy is the art of telling someone to go to hell, and they ask you for directions. Dr. Rowley doesn't know that. He knows the opposition, we are imps, we are fools, we are unpatriotic. Well, we are as patriotic as Dr. Rowley, all of us here. Born here, we are citizens, and we're going to die for Trinidad and Tobago. He should have led a CARICOM response. And in the discussions, it would have been a question of sharing the burden. I will tell you a thing. Haiti is part of CARICOM. Haiti has surplus population. Guyana does not have. Haitians right now have to get a visa to come to Trinidad. And there was a time, at least up to a year ago, where Venezuelans could walk into Trinidad. And our fellow CARICOM Haitians they have to get a visa to visit our country. The thing, our foreign policy is not well thought out. It is not coordinated. It is not rationalized. It is operating in Dr. Rowley's head.
Ms. Mohit, in terms of the proposed or alleged increase in price of pasta and macaroni, have any discussions been had with, say, the Supermarkets Association or etc. about the issue? Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
Members of the media, are there any further questions? Anybody like to raise any further questions? Any further questions? If there are no further questions to the team, may I, on behalf of Sister Vandana Moy, MP for Chabonas East, Shadow MP, Shadow Minister with responsibility for social development, social services, family services, my colleague on my immediate right, the Honorable MP for Naparima, Rodney Charles, and he's the Shadow Minister with responsibility for CARICOM, Foreign Affairs. I'd like to thank him for being here, and the team would like to thank you for taking the time this Sunday morning into getting to the noon hour for being here with us today, right? So that we can share with you some of our thoughts on some burning national issues affecting the lives of every single citizen in our republic, man, woman, and child. And we have brought it to your attention, and we thank you for your presence. May I, on behalf of the team and on behalf of the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisasa, extend to you and to your family warm and season's greetings and the best for a safe, healthy, progressive, and positive, and if you can get some prosperity in this season of austerity. In this season of austerity, I wish you well. Thank you very much.